Okay, so the first thing I want you to know is about context, okay? Context. Context is everything, apparently. And this is a story about two bullets. And Dr. Henry Dr. Henry unannexed is the father of the placebo research, placebo. And what he would do is he would treat soldiers on the battlefield, and he noticed a difference in how civilians and soldiers experience pain.
Doc.
They really hurt.
Could I have more morphine, please?
Nurse.
For some strange reason, says Daniel Carr.
The intensity of the pain associated with being shot was lower in the battlefield than in civilian life.
What could explain that?
You know, maybe soldiers are they're tough guys. They suck it up. They don't,
well...
No. Context.
Context. That was Beecher's very simple explanation.
Context.
Meaning that the pain that you feel when you're hit by a bullet, it's not just about the bullet. It's just as much about the story that comes with the bullet. So consider these two different stories. Story number one, you are a soldier and you've been shot. As the bullet passes through you, the first thing you think is, oh man, I'm shot.
The second thing you think is,
wait a second, I'm alive.
If I can be evacuated from here, I'll have a period of recuperation.
They'll take me to a hospital, there'll be nurses there.
I may get a medal.
And a pension.
Or a bonus. I'll certainly be acclaimed.
They'll send me home, throw me a parade.
I'll be a hero.
Now consider the civilian story. This time you're a regular guy, civilian in Boston. Maybe you own a shop.
Can I help you, sir?
This is a stick-up. Give me your money.
Oh my God, no.
And you've been shot. As the bullet passes through you, this time the thoughts flashing through your head have nothing to do with glory.
That's right.
Instead, you think, yeah, I'm alive, but what's going to happen to me now?
You wouldn't get a medal. You were in trouble.
How am I going to pay the doctor bills?
Going to be out of commission.
I'm going to lose my job. How do I pay the rent?
And if your family was depending upon you, they suffered.
Nothing good is going to come of this. One bullet, two very different stories. And it's the difference in the stories, said Dr. Beecher, that explains the difference in the experience of pain.
Those stories you're saying are somehow filtering the pain even before it's felt?
Yeah.
That even as the bullet enters the skin,
right away,
or within seconds thereafter,
you spin yourself a story about what's going to happen to you next. Not consciously, but way down deep in your head. And the story you tell, that makes all the difference.
What they're saying is your whole identity is something that we construct from 1 second to another. So it's a composite of a narrative, or moments that become a narrative that extends beyond just words. It goes into touch, color, odors, and we use these inputs to generate the first frame to the next frame. So if we want to change the experience, what we need to do is change the story. The story filters the experience. And Sean Archer, who talks about this in his TED Talk, he says the lens through which your brain views the world shapes your reality. Change the lens, change your happiness, change every single outcome at the same time. So I have a free association exercise for you guys to do right now with me, okay? I'm going to show you a series of 3 images, and I just want you to write down the first thing that comes to your mind. All right? I don't want you to overthink this, so you guys will need a piece of paper or something to write on. I'm going to flash these images in front of you, and then just write down what you think, and we're going to go through this, okay? An emotion, just a random thought, free associate, okay? You guys ready? Mm-hmm. Here's the next one. Now, it could be serious, it could be funny, it could be sad, it could be whatever it is that you feel. And then I have one more for you. This is the last one. Write down the first thing that comes to your mind when you see this. The assumption is this is something that you're experiencing, that you're part of the scene, that this is something that has happened to you. So everybody got that? I'm going to play through. So you're in this traffic. You're not like looking at it. You're in here. You're on this busy street going nowhere fast. This is your ice cream cone. And this is your car. You guys want to share? Ben, Matthew?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, what'd you write down for this?
All right, I had traffic. Ugh.
Stress.
Okay, good.
Mine was the same: traffic congestion, stress.
Okay, next one.
Tragedy. Kid crying, sticky.
Nice.
I wrote down melted, sucks, waste.
Okay. So Ben and Matthew, you guys have very similar shared experiences, except for Ben is filtering it, at least this one, through the lens of a father.
That's right.
Because he's like, what did you say? Messy, sticky, kid crying?
Yeah.
Because you assume it's your kid's ice cream because you're not going to drop the ice cream, right?
No way.
Okay.
I've dropped
So
ice cream before. So I look at that and I feel very sad. It's like that's happened before because it looks delicious.
Okay. So here's the interesting thing is, as I run this by other people, some people said, hey, 10-second rule. I'm not going to tell you who we know that said that, but they're just still like, it's salvageable. This is still not a total loss, right? Okay, your third one.
Theft, anxiety, curiosity.
Mine was bastard. And the reason I felt gross is because there was a stranger in my space.
Oh, you felt violated.
Felt violated, that's right.
All right, so I'm borrowing this from Jack Canfield, and it's a formula that you guys can write down and use whenever you're feeling that you're losing control of your life. And it's a very simple formula. It says E plus R equals O. Then an event happens with your reaction determines the outcome. Now, you can't control the event. Those things happen. The only thing that you can control is how you react to it, and then you produce a different outcome. So it's interesting that through different lenses, a singular event can have multiple outcomes depending on your reaction to said event. Okay? So in the law of attraction, what we know is that what you focus your mind on, you attract. So if you seek the positive in everything can turn into a learning opportunity if you make it. So what I want to do is retrain your brain and do the exercise again. This time I want you to look at the scene and try to figure out a positive way of looking at it. I want you to change your reaction so that the outcome is different. You guys understand that, Matthew and Ben?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here we go. Now we're going to do it again, and I'm going to give you a little bit more time to think because you have to form new neural pathways. It's going to take a little longer than your initial reaction. So how can you look at this moment being stuck in traffic and turn frustration, stress, anxiety, all those negative emotions into something positive? And don't tell me your answer just yet. I'm going to cycle through these. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Moving on to the next one here. Same ice cream cone. Okay. Last one. Here we go. Now, these were designed in a very specific sequence, going from what I believe to be the easiest to the hardest. So one is a minor inconvenience. The other one, or a fact of life, actually. The other one is one of those oops moment. And then the last one, like Matthew had said, it's a major frustration and a feeling of invasion and loss of privacy, a violation. Let's hear what you guys have to say or respond to this first image.
So I have time alone, podcast, learning, and peace.
Nice.
For me, it's just like there's so many people around me living very interesting lives. So there's so many rich stories that I can look at and observe around me.
I love that. So it's like the city has so many stories to uncover.
Yeah, look at all the people there on the side of the road, and they're all doing different things, and they're all going someplace. So there's interesting stories to pick apart there.
Mm-hmm. So that's like the urban version of Stop to Smell the Roses. We're always rushing to get from point A to point B. And this momentary inconvenience can turn into an opportunity to just like, that's a sign I never saw before. That's an interesting mom and her kid over there, to the left. And Ben's like, hey, this is my mobile classroom. This is my sanctuary. Nobody can reach me here. So it's like I'm alone in my own thoughts, and it's my most meditative space. That's super awesome. Good job, you guys. So then you'll see that the same situation through a different lens can have a profoundly different impact on your life. So this is me helping you to jumpstart or get your brain moving in a different direction. So here's the second one. Ben and Matt, what did you guys write down?
Okay, so I wrote, I didn't need it anyway. It's a low-calorie snack now, and it's food for birds.
I like that.
For me, I said, at least it didn't hit my shoes.
Fashion or slave to fashion right there.
That's right. I mean, I could always buy another, but it saved me on some very bad calories. So I'm good. I had 2 licks, so I'm good. I had I absolved my sweet tooth. I'm good now.
I liked how Ben framed this as a benefit to others. It may be a loss to you, but it gets a benefit to the birds or to the ants or whatever other creatures can lap this up. Or maybe a dog's going to walk by, like a black Labrador or something's going to lick it up, and he doesn't have ice cream that often.
That's a big win for that guy.
Yes. And it's also, maybe you can look at this as, I don't have to do cardio today. I can skip cardio, which sucks, right? Somebody else had said, hey, this is an Instagram moment. Turn this thing not only as a benefit to others, but others in a way that can be shared socially. And that was really smart. I love that. So you can see, like, we can turn things quite dramatically. This last one is the most challenging one. So I didn't hear many good ways to spin this, but there are a couple in here. So let's see what you guys are able to do. You're all very creative, so go ahead.
Yeah, I had a tough one with this one. Basically, it's like, hey, I get a new computer, get a new camera, and a fresh tint.
For me, I thought, oh, that guy really needed it more than I did. No one is hurt. I could always buy those new things.
They're just things, right?
It's not a big deal.
That's great. So I think in this way, Matthew here took kind of the same approach that you did, Ben, which was to say, how could this be a valuable experience for other people? It's an inconvenience to you, but Matthew's like, somebody else needed it more than me, and I'm okay. And sometimes I might be that person. I mean, like if you hit really hard times, or maybe in your youth or whatever, you had to do something like this. So it's a little bit of understanding and empathy, and just looking at how you can provide to others. That actually allows you to spin this very differently. And this is the story about my son. His name is Otto, and he's 14 years old now. And when he was given a choice to study a foreign language, instead of choosing Spanish, which most kids did, or French or something else, he decided to choose Latin because he's kind of very academically inclined. And the problem was he was transferring into a school for gifted kids, and he was already behind everybody else, kind of joining midstream. And so it was very difficult for him to adapt. And so one day I come home after work, and my wife is waving a piece of paper at me and saying, Chris, did you see this? Saying it with a tone of voice that it makes any husband concerned, like, oh my gosh, something really bad happened, and I hope it's not my fault. And so I looked at it and I opened it up, and it's his report card for Latin. And I looked at it and I was a little shocked myself. Now, out of 100 score, he got a score of 2. Meaning whatever he did, if there were 10 questions, he only got 2 right. And at first I was like starting to fill up with anger myself. I was thinking, my God, that's like beyond an F. Like 50% would be an F. And he scored like 2. I don't even understand that. That's 20%. And she's looking at me with like full rage. And she said, can you believe it? When I asked him how he's doing at Latin, he told me fine. And I think the burden was put upon me to go and discipline my son. And I was having all these images in my mind about how my dad would have handled that situation. I mean, we're talking about belt across the backside at this point, or, hey, start packing your bags because you're not allowed to stay home anymore kind of situation. And I didn't want to have that kind of conversation with my son. And I was starting to get real creative because I don't see him that much in terms of the day. Like I work long hours, I come home. I don't want to be the bad guy. So my brain starts kicking into overdrive. So I said to my wife, well, this is kind of an interesting situation that we're in. And I'm just curious because you and I were both creative, and we actually don't believe in the academic school system very much, and even school in general. Is it that important to us that his grades are good? Do they even matter? And that kind of caused her to slow her thinking down a little bit. I knew that was not going to be satisfactory to her, so I kept going on. I said, well, here's the interesting thing. He decided to choose a very hard language to learn. And he should get credit for that. He should not be discouraged for trying that. And the way that I see it, he's learned more Latin than you and I. And when I was in college, I tried to learn Latin and I dropped out. I quit because it was that hard. I couldn't understand the language. He didn't get 80% wrong. He got 20% right. So he speaks more Latin than both of us combined. So we shouldn't punish him for that. And with that, I think her whole mindset around that report card completely changed. And that's what I'm trying to emphasize with you in terms of changing your lens.
Jesse was completely fine with the situation?
Yeah. And I didn't even have to yell at him. So by the time I walked upstairs, he was in his bed. He was reading something. I came in. I said, hey, buddy, I saw your report card. You didn't do that well, but I know you're trying your best, so just keep at it. He goes, I will, Dad. And I'm glad you asked that question because now he's getting A's in Latin, and he's one of the best students for his teacher. This was a combination of two things. One is he's just learning it, and he found a better teacher, and he just needed to work a little bit more at it. So when he got a different teacher, he performed much better. Okay. So this is one of those expressions I love sharing because they're kind of like inversions, right? Change the way you look at things, and the things you look at will change. So I want to ask you guys right now, what's holding you back from achieving your goals? This is all about unlocking your mind. So I wrote down a bunch of things here as things for us to talk about. A lot of you guys feel like you don't have enough experience, and so you can't go after a certain kind of job. That's very common. Or you're geographically undesirable. You live in a market that's a subprime market or in a developing country, and you can't achieve this because of your location. So the location becomes a thing that limits you from achieving your goals. Some will say that I don't know the right people. You know, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Or maybe your portfolio isn't quite up to snuff. Or maybe you don't have enough examples of one type of work like packaging or web design. So therefore, you can't go out and grow your business. Some believe that they don't have enough money. They don't have the capital it takes to grow your business. Maybe you're in a situation where you're living hand to mouth, where you barely have enough runway for the month. Some of you guys are juggling many things, maybe multiple jobs. You're a father or a mom, you have kids, you got so many things that are calling for your attention, so you have no time to do the things that you need to do. You don't have the resources. You don't have the right team. They're too junior, they're too senior, they're too difficult to manage, whatever it is. Maybe you have too many distractions that are holding you back. I don't know what to focus on. I'm trying to do everything all at the same time and I can't achieve that goal. Or maybe it's just some self-esteem issues that you can't get over. So we're going to launch into this in terms of beliefs now. And I want to ask you guys, what limiting beliefs are holding you back? All right. So what I want you to do is to probably pull up some kind of program where you can type into, like a basic text editing program. And I want you to follow along. I'm going to give you a couple of prompts and then I'll tell you when you should start working. Okay. I'm going to give you a few minutes to work at that point in time. So what limiting beliefs do you have around money? You kind of have to search inside your brain to kind of dig something up, because money seems to be one of the most difficult things that I have to help entrepreneurs with in terms of charging too much, what is fair, what is valuable. So what are your beliefs around value? What are your limiting beliefs around quality in terms of how the work looks on aesthetics or anything else? Is it the most important thing? Does the best design always win? What are your beliefs around that and around creativity? So I'm going to give you an example, okay? Here's an example of what you might write down for value. And I think Ben and Matt are going to help me out with this in a little bit. So I'm prepping you guys there. You guys are going to get queued up on deck. So for value, you might think this, and I see this happen quite a bit because I teach designers and creatives and entrepreneurs how to charge more money for the work that they do. And one of the things that we say is to price the client, not the job. So then by that, it's inferred that you charge different people different amounts, and that rich people get charged more than poor people, or big companies get charged more than smaller companies. And so then the reaction that I get from them is they can't take that next step because they're stuck on this part, that it's dishonest to charge a client a higher price just because they can afford more. Even on one of our latest YouTube episodes with Aaron Draplin, he says, that's insane. He says it on that episode. So he's of that mindset that he should not charge two different prices for the same amount of work. Maybe another thing about value is that no client will agree to pay me this much, or I'm not sure I'm worth that much. There's a lot of different iterations of that, okay? So here are some prompts for you to think about. I've listed them here: money, relationships, value, quality, creativity, fairness, work, family, the system, sales, control, power, happiness, failure, fear, and self-worth. What I want to do is give you, I want to say 5 to 10 minutes, and I want you to write down as many limiting beliefs as possible. And I don't want you to judge, I just want you to go through that, and we're going to talk about it in a few minutes. So everybody right now, write down some limiting beliefs in terms of what's holding you back from achieving your goals. What do you think they are?
Chris, do you have any limiting beliefs?
I'd like to think not, because I think everything that I want is on the opposite side of fear. And so when I know that, I just charge forward. I mean, there's lots of things that scare me, but I think what makes me successful is my ability to push aside the fear and charge forward. And I have an unshakable belief in self that if I put enough time and attention to something, I can solve it. And I used to have many limiting beliefs. For example, my older brother asked me one time, how big do you want your company to be? And it was a trick question, because I would tell him, I think if I had 10 employees and I did this amount of money, that'd be great. He says, why do you stop there? He goes, and I told him, I don't know. And this is what I think when I was like 19 years old, maybe a little older. And I hadn't had a clear vision of who I was and what I wanted to accomplish. So I put some kind of container around how big my dream could be. I don't have that anymore, because I believe, and I truly believe this, and people laugh at me, and I'm like, you can laugh at me now. You'll see in a few years when I tell them that the future is going to be $100 million company on our way. That's just a pit stop on our way to a multi-billion-dollar company. I just believe that. Now, this is part 2 of the mindset stuff. And what I want to do is to go deep. We want to drill down into your belief, into its core, like crack through the crust and just dig right into the center of your belief and see what's there, okay? And as I mentioned this before, I feel this way, and that we all kind of have a natural aversion to the ideas that come from other people, that when they're not our own idea, it can sound threatening to us. And this is why we want to practice the Socratic approach. And basically, it's getting people to come to their own conclusion via some very carefully designed questions from Socrates' Socratic approach. And I have taught for almost 15 years. And I have to admit, it's been a failure of mine for a number of years in terms of teaching this way, because I taught the way I was taught, in that when you were presented work, you would just give your opinion. And in that scenario, as a teacher-student role, that's exactly why students come to you. They just want you to give you their opinion. But I started to research into different ways of learning and different methods of teaching, and a question-based one allows the students to discover the answer for themselves. So it took me a while to learn this thing. There is some issues there. One is it requires more time. So for expediency, what happens is when somebody presents us a problem, we feel like we're short on time, or that they're short on time. So we give them a critique. We give them advice. We give them our opinion, and it becomes very difficult. This becomes a habit for us, so that when we meet clients or we meet new people, we tend to just want to offer them sometimes an unsolicited opinion. And it has some dangerous consequences if you don't do it carefully. Okay. So now I've learned to use questions to help others realize what they should or shouldn't do. So in that, what we do is we help them to discover something, that there's this inner voice that's inside your head that is what you presume to be your own, and it's actually not yours at all. So what I want you to do, I want you to put your belief into a format like this and just follow along here. So we're going to examine it a little bit. And what we realize is pretty much everything that we think was formed a long time ago. And there was an influential person or people in our lives that consciously or unconsciously taught us these lessons, these beliefs. So everybody just pick one or two things, and we're gonna see if we can't crush through this belief. Now, in the past, what I would do is I would just give you the answer. I'm like, that's insane. Like, and I would argue with you and then prove to you that it's correct. But what I've learned from my experience with Carrie is I need you to come to that realization, because you won't take action unless you do. And hopefully I've designed this framework properly so that the answer and what I'm trying to teach will reveal itself in the process of doing it. The next part of this exercise, there's two parts to it. Let's say the limiting belief is from your dad. And what I'd like you to do is to make a case for why you believe this person is qualified to advise you on this subject. And after you're done doing that, I want you to take the counter to that, which is I want you to make a case why you believe this person isn't qualified to advise you on this subject. And then to weigh the two to see which is truer to you. Go ahead, man. What is one of your limiting beliefs? And this has to be something that you truly believe, right?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
The first thing that comes to mind is that I can't charge more or participate on high-level creative discussions because I don't have a design degree or like from a respected design school.
Okay. So everybody understand that? So Ben feels like the limit to what he can charge is tied to the design degree that he has. And you do have a design degree, right?
It's a media arts degree.
Okay. From what school?
USC. So University of South Carolina.
Okay. Now, I'm curious, if you had to assign this to a particular person, an influential figure in your life, who might have told you that degrees matter?
I'm pretty sure it's my grandmother, Grammy.
And how did she say this to you?
It was more like a threat. I mean, it was like, yeah, if you don't, you have to go to school. You have to get a good degree. Otherwise you won't be successful.
So this is like in your childhood?
Yeah.
Did she take care of you?
Well, she was always the one that like had the most belief in me.
Okay. That's interesting. So you had a good relationship with her?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You feel really close to her?
Yeah.
Okay. So in a way, she was looking out for you, and she would tell you, you always have to get, you have to go to a good school in order to get a good job, right?
Like it's the key. It's the key for success.
Yeah, education is everything, right? Okay. Now, if you had to, can you make a case for why she's the most qualified person to advise you on the subject of the schooling? Was she herself like a postgraduate degree or went to an Ivy League school?
No.
Okay, so I want you to do your best
Okay.
to make a case for her. What would you say?
So she didn't go to school. She didn't go to college. I don't even think she graduated high school. And she was able to achieve a certain status in life by marrying a doctor. And that mattered a lot to her. It's like the status kind of thing. So she saw education, that's how she achieved success through somebody else's education, but still that was the key in her mind.
Okay. You're not making the best argument for your grandmother being the most qualified person right now. So you're saying she's a high school dropout.
Yeah.
And she married a doctor, and as an outsider, she saw that those were good things.
Yeah, it's almost like she had a very tumultuous, I would say, decade in her 20s,
Yeah.
and she didn't want me to go through that. And so her answer was education.
Okay. She wanted to save you from doing what she did.
Right.
So repeating the same mistake. Okay, great.
I
Now,
wonder if there's another layer to that, just because
Mhm.
I know Ben had said she married a man that was a doctor.
Mhm.
I wonder if her perception of a successful man in the family also has to be highly educated in order for that person
Oh,
to,
yeah.
I think
manage
that
the
was
family.
obvious, right?
Yeah. So I
100%.
think maybe that's something that Ben might feel the pressure of, since he's the man in the household as well.
For sure. Yep.
Okay. So now what I'd like for you to do is to make a case for why she isn't the most qualified.
Well, that's kind of easy. She doesn't know from experience. She doesn't have a degree. She never went to school.
Did she go to work?
No.
Didn't work. What else? Was her relationship with your grandfather great?
The first one, no. So she went through a divorce.
The doctor?
No, not with the doctor. She married the doctor as a solution to the rest of it.
Okay. And so how was her second relationship?
Good. Yeah, good.
Did you have a good relationship with him?
Yep.
And what was that like?
It's very non-committal. We weren't like really close, me and my grandfather.
Okay.
Yeah. But it was
All right.
pleasant.
Okay. It was pleasant. And did he advise you on the importance of school?
Not really. Like I said,
Okay.
we weren't really close. My grandmother and I were close, and she always used him as like an example.
Right. So obviously I cannot coach each and every single person to overcome every one of their beliefs. So I designed this worksheet exercise for you to examine your own beliefs and possibly come to the same conclusion that you would if you were working with me. If you can do that, then I've taught you how to teach this thing, which would be amazing, right? So I'm just going to make some observations here, Ben.
Mhm.
Before I do that, though, now that you've kind of listed this thing down, do you have any ideas to how you're feeling about this, whether or not you should give it more or less weight than you have? Do you think this belief is true or untrue based on just this quick evaluation?
Well, it's kind of funny because, and I didn't even think about it until we talked, and it does seem a little ridiculous now that I hear her voice, because I don't listen to her advice on much else. We were close, and I love her, but her lens is it's very different than mine. So I don't put much stock into the other things she says. So this is a little bit, it's been eye-opening for me.
Well, sometimes we conflate the love that somebody shares with us, somebody who believes in us, and that they only want the best for us. So why would they ever give us something that is not true? But it turns out those bits of advice, these truths that she's giving to you, is based on a very limited perspective of the world.
Right.
It came, now you're looking at it, it's like, it seems very clear to me that she had a failed marriage with a person who probably wasn't as educated, then had a successful marriage with a person who was very educated, and that must be the secret to life. And that is what they say, mixing up correlation with causality.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting too that the relationship that you value is the one with your grandmother and not with your grandfather, who's a really educated man. So there's a lot that's now kind of unbundling in terms of success, education, and how you feel about a human being.
Right.
So if you're saying right now, like, Ben, if you could give a reverse inheritance, meaning like you died and you were to give either grandmother or grandfather all of your savings and your life earnings, who would you give it to, your grandmother or your grandfather?
Grandmother.
So you see, even in terms of how you were made to feel, you would give your valuable things to your grandmother and not your grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
So you had said something at the very beginning. that your education, that because you didn't go to prestigious design school, that you couldn't charge more, that value is tied to the degree. Do you think that's true?
No.
Okay.
Wow.
So you see how we deconstructed an idea there?
Yeah.
Okay. So you guys, if you can't figure it out already, and I think some of you guys are already figuring it out, that I'm teaching you certain facilitation techniques already, and that you're going to be learning it as you're going to learn how to teach it as you're learning it for the first time. Stop the share.
If the limiting belief comes from yourself, from past experiences?
Like what?
Oh, let me give you an example for myself. So I tried to open a business right out of school, 2007, and then I failed. And I blamed that on the economy and also not knowing how to run a business at the time because I was so young. From that, I feel like I'm very scared to even consider the idea of opening a business myself again.
Okay.
And I don't really want to. I don't think that I have it in me. I don't think I could grind that out to actually be responsible for opening and running my own business.
Okay. What is your limiting belief then, Matt? We know the reaction to it, but what is the belief then? What is the barrier or the challenge?
That I don't have it in me to grind as hard. Like, I'm not an entrepreneur. I don't believe that I have the time or drive to actually run a business if I wanted to.
Okay, so you're saying I am not an entrepreneur because you don't have the grind. This is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What else? You don't have the grind or
the time to do it.
time. Okay. This is
without
perfect.
Without it negatively impacting me in my normal day-to-day life, my regular life.
Okay. This is fantastic. Okay, so we're going to practice this, and there's this idea that there's this absurdity of thought, right? And Matthew has an idea that for some of us who don't experience the same truth or this thought can think, well, that's a crazy thing that Matthew's doing. He had one failed experience during the worst economic period in the modern history of the United States. And he had a bad experience from that, and he felt all kinds of feelings that he's not ready to address just yet. But his conclusion is, I'm just not an entrepreneur because I can't grind it out. I don't have the time. I want to talk about failure for a second. Now I know how to solve this problem. Oh, it just took me a second. Thank you. Okay. Matthew, you have the underlying belief isn't about this one experience to say you're an entrepreneur. You have certain pain and association with failure.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have to say, like, your belief is like, you're a bad person and you're not worthy if you fail. That's your belief. And where does that come from? Does that come from dad or from mom? Who's judging you so harshly in your life that if you fail, you're just not worthy of being loved or respect or admiration, the things that we crave in life?
Man, that's a tough one because I feel like now they love me no matter what I do, especially my mom. No, I think
retrace it to like 5-year-old Matthew, 3-year-old Matthew.
Yeah, it's probably my dad then, because he didn't give me any praise for anything.
See, so now you understand where this is coming from.
Mm-hmm.
If you dig deeper underneath the surface, you get to the real truth. And now you can sit there and make a case for why your dad is right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why is your dad an expert on failure or success? And you will find that oftentimes that list is going to be very thin. And I did sequence it this way to give you the best shot of proving to yourself why you should believe it. And most often when we tested this exercise, people had a hard time writing why they should even listen to that person.
Mm-hmm.
And the camp for why they shouldn't listen to that person would need 3 times as many lines as you're seeing on your screen. So this is the problem that I'm seeing here, is that we just assume this belief to be true. We never sit there and break it down like this. We're kind of ruled by our emotions, and we don't really put thought into it, and we definitely don't write them down to catalog what it is that we're thinking. If you were in court and the court case never ended, where the judge, you being the judge, were going to hear testimony from both the plaintiff and the defendant forever. Like if both parties could afford legal fees forever and would drag the case out, as much as anti-monopoly cases are, they just run forever and they don't reach a conclusion. So this is where I want you to present evidence to yourself. Make the best case you can as the plaintiff and as the defendant, and then be the judge and really think this through so that you can figure out, you know what, this is a belief I've held on for 36 years. I don't want to have this anymore from here, and I'm going to throw this thing out. Or this is actually a really true belief, and I don't have to doubt myself anymore. I am good enough. I am qualified to do this, and then move on. Here are two things that we're going to do, and you're going to have some homework around this, so it's important that you guys understand this. Number one is what I want to do is help Matthew reach the natural conclusion of his thinking by extending out his logic. So I want to exaggerate or use hyperbole or find an extreme example of what he's saying to see if he can't figure out if what his thinking is true or not. So Matthew says, I'm not an entrepreneur. That's his conclusion. Because I just can't grind it out. I don't have the time. Now, I'm curious, Matthew. I see you as one of the hardest working people that are on the on staff. Do you believe to be true that you're not a hard worker? That you're not willing to do what it's needed to finish out a job? Like, aren't you at the office sometimes all night long?
It's true. But then in comparison to you, I feel like I'm dwarfed by the amount of energy I put into this company.
Okay. So this is where I'm going to keep the energy or the conversation focused on you.
That's right. Okay.
We're just going to focus on, because you didn't say, I'm not a grinder compared to you.
Right.
I'm not dedicating that much time as to you. You just said, I'm not a grinder. I don't have time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fascinating and almost shocking to me, because if I help you to see that, so you're saying you don't spend all your time at work, or you're not always working on things, or you don't go beyond what is expected of you. You're not grinding it out. And it's also saying that, or the opposite is that you don't spend your free time doing self-development, like self-learning, which I know is also not true. So you, to me, currently, don't you already exhibit those two attributes, that you're a grinder and you do spend a lot of focused time and energy developing yourself?
Yeah, that sounds true.
Okay. So I think there's just some pain associated with the failure. And how many companies do you think failed during 2007? How many companies do you think failed?
Half of them.
Too many to list.
Yes.
And we saw the extremes of that too. The people who failed, what did they do? Some of them who failed, in a few rare cases.
Some people committed suicide.
Right. And so in a natural, like a natural human being who's experienced this, some people have gone to the extreme, and this was probably the worst, and you didn't know it at the time, obviously, because you graduated ready to start a company, would be the worst kind of economic period to start a business or to be in business. And do you know how long it's taken for the economy to recover after 2007?
Like 9 years or something like that? Decade.
Pretty much like they had to go through Obama's presidency for it to kind of turn around, right? So that was at least 8 years there. A year with Bush and 8 years with Obama. So, okay, so there's two things that we want to do here, and I will talk about the second one now, is if Matthew's saying something is true, then it reasons that the opposite cannot be true. And that's an argument technique, a debating technique. And I want you to try that too, okay? So you can do this to yourself, but I'm also going to ask you at some point to partner up with somebody to take a limiting belief that they have and to challenge them and go all the way down. So if you believe this is true, so you never grind, you just kind of push it all the way through. So there's never been a moment where you're at the office working all these hours and you use their exact words against them. He gave me very few words to work with. And he says, I am not an entrepreneur. Okay, so I can ask him, what does it mean to be an entrepreneur? And he can list all the traits it takes to be an entrepreneur. And I said, so then okay, let's try that right now.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it to be an entrepreneur, Matthew? Give me three things.
To worry and focus on the business 24/7.
Okay, go ahead. What's the next one?
To just have brilliant ideas all the time.
Okay, one more.
And just to be able to hold a very long focus.
Okay. It's very interesting because Matthew already makes it extreme, and you can hear in the way that he describes it, very few people would fit into this category. So check this out. Matthew, do you think I worry and focus on the business 24 hours a day all the time?
You?
Yeah.
I think most of the time. I feel like 85% of the time.
Maybe that's the perception I've created for you.
That's the perception that I see. That's for sure.
Right. So when I'm out to lunch, when I'm out traveling to Japan, or I'm just doing whatever it is I'm doing, or I'm having my meetings with people, I'm just chatting. Most of the times they remark, and this is the interesting thing from a different point of view. And I would show them the work at the office. I'm like, I don't know what project that is, but I know they're doing something interesting. And you know what they say to me? They're like, wow, I'd like to be you one day. I said, I didn't know that project was done, how much it was done for, and when it was done. I have no idea. So does that sound like contrarian to your belief or no?
A little bit. Yeah. So just to summarize that thought, like you're not worrying about all those aspects of all the other jobs that are happening at the moment or have happened.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not worrying technically about that part.
No, I'm not. And you know also, you guys, we're being very transparent right now. Ben and Matthew, basically, Ben runs all the marketing stuff. Matthew's running and optimizing all our YouTube efforts. And I'm just out thinking about like what kind of piece of content I want to make or producing a podcast. So I think the way Matthew framed this is he's worrying, or an entrepreneur worries and focuses on their business 24 hours a day. I don't know that many people that do that. I'm not that one. I'm not that way. So he's very selectively described it so he can exclude himself from that thing, right? And then he has brilliant ideas all the time. And if that were true, I would have never had any failures, Matt. And you've already witnessed several setbacks in our company, right?
Mm-hmm.
That cannot be true. Otherwise, it would be flawless. Mm-hmm. Some of the best entrepreneurs have had some of the biggest setbacks and failures. Like who's the founder? Roy Kroc, is that his name? Lee Kroc or whatever his name is, the founder of McDonald's.
That sounds right.
Mm-hmm. He had failed many things. He was a milkshake salesman before he bought that.
Ray Kroc.
Ray Kroc. Thank you. Right. So we know too that Elon Musk was at the brink of bankruptcy when SpaceX saved his companies. We also know that Tony Hsieh nearly just running on fumes on a line of credit from Wells Fargo before Zappos hit. And this idea of holding focus. So like I'm just going through and systematically dismantling each and every one of your thoughts there in terms of like what you think an entrepreneur is. I believe these traits are accurate, except for the little conditional parts that you add to it. You do need to have the ability to focus. That was the clearest one to me. Mm-hmm. And I believe you have the ability to focus, don't you?
I think so.
Well, tell me about your distractions then. What are you distracted by?
Danger zone for an employee.
Well, we'll just say that theoretically that's how this is going to work. So here's what I want you to do after this, and we'll tell you the homework at the end, but to partner up with somebody, and I want you to try this exercise yourself to just reach the natural conclusion. Just keep going down that path. So you're saying this never happens or this always happens. Using the words never and always helps to dismantle the other person's thought. Mm-hmm. Okay? Use never and always. And then try the opposite is true or not true effect. If you're saying this is true, then the opposite cannot be true. And see what happens there, okay? So one thing I want you to do for this week, and this is totally, we treat you like adults. You do what you have to do in terms of life and work. but we'd really like for you to participate so that we can learn together and we can hear any feedback or questions that you have surrounding homework or anything else that we're doing. So one, based on the Carrie story, I want you to research someone who fits your profile, someone you relate to and identify with that is doing exactly what you want to do. So I think Carrie could have had this breakthrough had she just looked a little harder. Instead of looking at clients, she should have been looking at competitors and doing a wider search around outside of her state and also within the country and maybe internationally. Somewhere out there, someone is doing exactly what you want to do, getting the kind of money that you want to get, living the life that you should have. It's like a David Byrne song, like, "Where is my beautiful wife?" That's what's happening. Somebody else has got your life. And the cool part is not to feel jealous or envious of them. It is to really understand that they just have one thing that's different than you. And that's that their mindset is different. So I want you to write a short bio on them, and we'll figure out a way for you guys to share the bios later. Okay? So I want you to find somebody who's just like you, but is doing the thing that you want to do. Study them. Stalk them on cyberspace, on the internet. Cyber stalk them, okay? Now, the second part to this is I want you to partner with someone from the group and practice the Socratic approach, and also to examine each other in terms of your limiting beliefs and see if you can't help somebody get unstuck. And what I want you to do is we're going to take turns. This is not a client-vendor relationship, but I wanted to treat something very similar. So if somebody has a limiting belief, I want you to try the two things that we talked about. One is to use the extremes, to continue down like one singular path of logic, using words like always and never. So this is always true, or you've never seen the opposite to be untrue, which is the inverse logic thing. Try that and see if you can get them to a state of mind where they're thinking about their problem differently. And the person who's sharing your limiting belief, I want you to grade the other person by this. How likely are you to change? Very likely, unlikely, or you're totally unchanged and unconvinced. So we're going to take turns, and I suggest spending no more than an hour, half an hour together. 10 minutes of you working, and then 5 minutes of reflection, and then switching roles. So 10 minutes and then 5 minutes of reflection, switching roles, 30 minutes total, okay? And I'm going to ask you to do one listening exercise. And the listening exercise is this. There's this thing that I learned from my therapist, that we have to learn to be better listeners. So find somebody that you trust. And the exercise is to repeat back every single thing they said verbatim, not a synopsis, not a summary, exactly what they said. So if they said yellow dog, you say yellow dog. It's going to help you to practice to be more mindful, to quiet your own thoughts and focus solely on the other person. If you're doing this correctly, it'll be exhausting for you, and you won't be able to listen for very much for very long. So what they'll do is they'll say something, and you just raise your hand. Your hand raised says, "Stop talking. I'm going to say back to you what you just said to me," and just practice. Over time, you'll see that what you can retain is going to get longer and longer. But what it's really doing is it's teaching you to silence your own thoughts. So when you're talking to a real client in the real world, just lose yourself in what they're saying. Don't think about the response. Don't think about how you appear. Don't think about trying to sound smart. Just listen intently, okay? And lastly, this is a tough one. Teach someone what you've learned today. Anything that you learn, pull that apart and teach it to somebody else. That's how you master something. So you could take the exact same framework, which we're going to give to you, and try it on somebody, a friend, a family member, even a client. Ask them what a challenge is. Don't use the word limiting belief. I use those words very specifically because I'm trying to prime you to write down a belief you think is true, and I added the word limiting in front of it to get you to dislike your own idea. Okay? You can use the word challenge or barrier, an obstacle, something like that. So teach someone what you've learned today,